Hey, good morning, everybody. Just want to say hello. And this is Sunday morning, well, technically it's Thursday night, but we're recording the message from my home. Got my awesome buddy behind the camera, Sean. Um, but before we get into the message, before we get into anything else, I just want to say thank you for the outpouring of all the pictures on Facebook, all the cards and letters, and roses behind me to my side over here. Um, just want to have her say a little something about the cards and all that and what it meant.
We just want to thank you guys for, as you can see, all the cards. They're handmade and it's really heartfelt. That it was a big surprise, but it came at a perfect time. This with everything going on with COVID and the stress of trying to keep them in the daycare, and the financial crisis with everyone's feeling. Those cards really hit home and really encouraged us, and we so appreciated to see that the kids even took the time to draw
Yeah.
pictures and they things were told to us to encourage us, but we could really tell they were from the heart. And y'all don't realize how much that meant. That it's nice to realize that people do care. We care about you, but
Right.
it's nice that we know that you guys care about us. So we want to thank you guys, and really made our day.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right, so again, just thank you all very much. Please know that Rose and I miss everybody incredibly. There's nothing like hugging somebody's neck and being with them, and just talking and being face to face. But right now we can't do that, and we understand we don't like it, but we're going to do what we got to do. We just pray that everybody, Rose and I pray that everybody's healthy and doing well. We trust that everybody's weathering the current storm in a good way. That you're staying positive. You're not getting um, into a mode of fear or over concern. Just knowing that the Lord's going to walk through this storm with us, as opposed to standing on the other side and waiting for us to show up. Once we can, I feel it's important that we really cherish our time together as a family. And once we get the all clear from the governor, it'll be a great day of rejoicing, and I'm looking forward to that. I'm already up here in my brain. I'm just kind of formulating I'm being hopeful, prayerful, and wishful here that we're going to have a late spring picnic. I think that's going to be a blast. We'll be at the pavilion. As soon as I give the go ahead, I know our buddy George McDermott and Mark Broadhurst, they're going to be back there vacuuming and cutting grass and blowing the leaves out and doing all the stuff that they do. They're excited, and I'm just looking forward to being back together with the family. It's going to be a last minute thing, but it's going to be a great time. It's going to be plenty of food, lots of fun, lots of conversation, catching up, and just plain and simply lots of love. While we are where we are, please remember to pray for one another. Please remember to check in on one another. Yeah, that's just super important. We finally got a hold of somebody today that hadn't had contact with in a while, and it was really good to hear this person's voice. Well, I know Rose did the talking, and she kind of told me the aftermath, and it was just good to hear the person is doing well. And yes, please remember your tithes and offerings and my home church pledges, because it's all still needed. The business is still going on. I know there's forgiveness out there and what have you. How long it's going to last, how long it's going to take to get initiated, who knows. But we got to do as much as we can to do the right thing. So just make sure that you guys, if at all possible, that the tithes, offerings, my home church pledges are all made. There's a few guys that have volunteered to pick stuff up, pick up offerings and things of that nature. If you don't trust the mail, if you don't do the online giving and stuff like that, there's a few of us that will come to your house, pick it up, and bring it up to the church and put it in a lockbox. Sean has already done that a few times, and it's been a great thing. And we're just making as many avenues available as possible so that we know we can do what we know to do. If you need anything, please feel free to reach out to me, to Rose. You can get us on Facebook. You can, you know how to get a hold of somebody if you need to. If you need anything, or if you just want to hear a friendly voice, you can please feel free to call any of us. And the greatest thing that comes to mind in all of this, and the thing that gives me the most peace, is God is still on the throne. He's not left the throne. He's still there. He didn't say, "Hey, Mr. Lee, do you want to be on the throne for a few days?" He hasn't done that. Thank the Lord he hasn't. So he's still there. So let's kind of head towards the message now. I don't like to babble because I know I get involved and then I make a mess. I wasn't sure about what we were going to talk about today. I know I always want to give something relevant. I definitely want to do and speak what the Holy Spirit has to say. And it was kind of cool how this came about. Rose and I were having a conversation with our buddy Rusty. Everybody knows Rusty. We were having a conversation with him mid last week, and we were just talking about different stuff, different public things out in the public, being out and about, different reactions of people. But he said something during this conversation, and I wrote it down. Because we were talking about people's reactions and what they're projecting. So I want to talk about what we as a church family, we as a body of believers, we as the body of Christ, what are we projecting? So like I always do, I love Webster. I like to get into the dictionary and find out projecting. What does it mean? What does he say that it means? And I love looking it up in the Webster's dictionary because he was a Christian man and he likes to look at the old language and helps us understand a little better about what things mean. But projecting, it's extending outward beyond something else, or protruding, present or promote a particular view or image. So basically, what goes out before you? What do people see after talking to you? Yeah, what do they see after talking to you? What do people feel after they've spoken to you? And this is kind of a cool story. It's right into the middle of where we're talking. Rose was out at the store a few days ago, a week ago, something like that. And she was just picking up some stuff, and me personally, and she as well. I'm going to be my same old. I'm not going to change and freak out because of the circumstances. But it was just amazing the reactions that she was getting out of some people. She said hello to a woman and asked how she was. And the woman's response was that, "I'm scared." And my first reaction would have been, of what? The boogeyman? Come on. But also, Rose held the door for another person, and this person kind of side-skirted her and reached over and hit the handicap button so that she didn't have to come in contact or get near Rose. After checking out at the register, the worker asked her if she wanted some hand sanitizer, and that stuff is going like hotcakes right now, but asked her if she wanted a squirt of hand sanitizer. And Rose said, "No thanks, I'm good." And the woman looked at her like she had three heads. And Rose was just going through her normal day, being her normal, cheery, pleasant, communicative self, and it's just the amazing the responses that she was getting out of people. You know, it's the projections that she was getting was that of fear and anxiety. You know, and we're not given a spirit of fear. So let's take a step way back in the Bible. You know, I've told y'all before, I love the Old Testament, and the Lord really lets me hang out there a bunch. And I want to take a look at the projections of certain people. The first leader that I always think of when you say Old Testament, you know, who is the first one that you think of? Anybody? Raise your hand and tell me. Oh, yeah, you can't talk to me. Sorry. The first leader that I always think about in the Old Testament is Moses. You know, there was plenty of other leaders before him. Noah and Abraham were the epitome of obedience. In Genesis 6:9, it says, Noah was a righteous man who was blameless among the people of his time, and he walked with God. Now just kind of picture Noah. Picture yourself in Noah's shoes. Noah was told by God to build an ark. Okay? This is a guy that probably had a handmade broad axe and a bunch of donkeys and stuff like that. You know, he didn't have a lot of stuff. The ark was an amazing structure to be built back then, and even today it's an amazing structure to be replicated. He led his family and the animals into the next generation, if you will. If you stop and think about what Noah had to go through to build the ark, he had no cranes to lift heavy beams, no sawmill to cut those heavy beams, no chainsaw to cut down those heavy trees to make those beams from, no heavy equipment to get those big trees to a place to start working on them. The list goes on and on and on. If you know anything about construction, you know what it takes nowadays to do anything. You know, basically, nowadays, once you have the lot paid for, you can build a house in 120 days. And that is from the first hole dug to the here owner is your key. It's about 120 days. Maybe a little bit longer depending on the size of the house. And that's with all the modern equipment. So when I think about Noah and what he projected were a few things. Incredible obedience. You have to have incredible obedience to do something that makes absolutely no sense in that day. I mean, come on, build an ark for what? Okay? Incredible faith. Faith to believe that God would turn him, that would have him take on such an incredible task. I mean, he did it with him and his family, and that's basically all it was, and they built this ark. Incredible tenacity to stick with the task at hand amidst all of the adversity of the day. You know, I'm sure that as soon as he started building this great big boat, people were asking, "Whoa, Noah, what are you doing?" "Oh, I'm building an ark." "Oh, you're good, man. Good on you." So that's, you know, the first one was Noah. And then get into Genesis 12. You know, Abraham is told by God to leave his father's household. God told Abraham that he was going to make him into a great nation. Abraham left his father's household when he was not 18 or 20, not 30, like modern day. You're pretty much gone by in your 20s. At least Rose and I got married. I was 19 and I was gone. But no, Abraham left his father's household when he was 75 years old. And he left with his nephew, Lot. We all know what Abraham went through and how he became the father of Isaac. And if you don't know, read the book of Genesis from 12 on. It's an incredible story. You learn a lot out of it. But we all know the story about God telling Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac. His son Isaac was born to him in his 90s. So, he was looking for a son all those years, and he finally has a son. And then God says, "Oh, Abraham, I need you to take him and go sacrifice him." That says a lot about Abraham. We know the great nation that grew out of the loins of Abraham. So when I think about Abraham and what he projected were a few things. First, to pull up stakes and leave all that you have and all that you know, that you've known for 75 years, takes an incredible amount of obedience. To pull up stakes and go to a foreign land takes measures of faith that I don't think I have right now. If I did my math right, Abraham lived about 2,000 years after creation, and he lived about 2,000 years before Christ. So he basically lived right in the middle of the Bible. Back in those days, printed matter was probably, I'd bet a paycheck on it that the printed matter was very few and far between. And the same with records, printed records. There was probably no printed records, or they weren't preserved and they didn't hang around long. The point is, the relationship that Abraham had with God was just that, a relationship. He didn't have Genesis to Revelation to pull from, to study on, to think about, talk about. He had that relationship with the Lord, and that was it. So you and I have got stories of the Bible to historically go by today. They probably only had relationship with God and each other's stories to reflect on in that time. What I saw in the story of Abraham, what he projected was faith in God. I don't think there's anybody else that projects faith any better than Abraham. He was immovable by circumstances or what the world seemed to say about what made sense. Just face it, if somebody said, whoever's watching, "Hey, go sacrifice your son," do you think you would run and do it? No. And if somebody told you, "Hey, the Lord told me to sacrifice my son," you would talk them out of it. And because of that, because of the faith and his immovability in the circumstances, I believe that's why he didn't tell Sarah that he was going to go sacrifice Isaac. He didn't tell Sarah that the Lord had told him to go sacrifice Isaac. That's another message in and of itself. But Abraham projected faith. Isaac was a determined person. If you read the story, he was in love with Rebekah, and he was willing to do whatever it took to get the hand of Rebekah in marriage. Isaac projects determination. Then we jump ahead to Isaac's son, Jacob, and I've done a message about Jacob a while back. And there are a couple things that Jacob projected. I know that Jacob loved God. I know that Jacob was a wheeler and dealer. He was not just a person of stature. He was out there to make a deal. He always had some sort of an angle that he was working. He just loved to work the deals. I also know that at the end of his life, he worshiped God as he leaned on his staff. And what that kind of meant to me was, at that point, he seemed to have made things right before he passed, because at that point, he passed not too far after that. And, what I saw as far as Jacob and his projection at the end of his life, he projected reconciliation. Now we step on into Joseph. Joseph was an incredible person. He had some horrible things happen to him. His brothers didn't respect him. His brothers were jealous. His brothers betrayed him. He was sold into slavery. He was taken advantage of by Potiphar's wife and ultimately betrayed again. He regained the respect of Potiphar and was placed where God wanted him to be. And I'm fast forwarding through some of these life stories. Through it all, Joseph continued to do what was right because it was right. Joseph projected forgiveness. Joseph also projected love for God and love for God's people and love for doing what was right. That love reconciled his family. That love that he had for God, that love reconciled his family. Then we roll ahead into one of my favorites, and that's Moses. Moses was with us for 4 fat books of the Old Testament. He was with us for, yes, I counted them, 137 chapters of the most detailed direction by God. He had no Bible to learn from. Even though Moses was chosen by God as a child, he wasn't necessarily a person that had a real relationship with God in the beginning. Because his curiosity of a burning bush is where the relationship began between he and God. That encounter with God is where it began, and Moses never turned back. Moses was a leader. He was truly a friend of God's. He sought God for everything. After the burning bush encounter, Moses did nothing without checking with God. If you run the story of Moses through your mind, if you think about the reactions to circumstances, if you reflect on the attention to detail, you should see that Moses relied 100% on and projected God. Moses would never grumble or complain to his peers or his family. Moses took everything to God for God's input. Moses relied on God to tell him, "What do I tell Pharaoh? What if he asks who you are? What if he doesn't believe me? Where are we going to sleep tonight? What are we having for dinner? What path do we take tomorrow, Lord? Where are we going to get a drink? We're in the middle of a desert. Where are we going to get a drink? This water is bitter, God. What do we do next? These people are hungry for meat and are complaining. What do I do? Lord, you know, if you wipe these people out, what are the Egyptians going to say? See, when God gave Moses instructions, Moses would always humbly question God from the perspective of, Lord, you need to show me the way, because I don't know. I'm willing to do it. You just have to help me. You have to show me. Moses always gave God the credit for everything. Moses projected leadership, obedience, and love for God. He was a friend of God. And that's why I just love Moses. I love you get into some of the elder books of Moses, it's hard to read, like in Numbers and Leviticus, it's tough to read. But the overall story of Moses was that he was a humble man. He sought God's heart in every step he took. So then, You get to the Jordan, you cross the Jordan, and guess who we're going to talk about? Joshua and Caleb. See, they were leaders. They had a different spirit. They were kind of set apart. They weren't like the rest of the Israelites. That's why they crossed the Jordan and the rest of the older generation didn't. They followed God. They were obedient to God. If they projected anything other than leadership, it was the fact that they were not like the rest of the Israelites. They believed what God had to say. They knew that their future was better for them and their family than what was behind them. And their mindset was kind of, if God said it can be done, then consider it done. I don't care how big the other team is. God said we can do it, so that means we can do it. If God says it, that's good enough for me. Joshua was kind of like a modern day Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan never stepped into the ring thinking he was going to get defeated. He was big, but there was others out there bigger than him, and he never stepped into the ring thinking or saying the other guy was going to beat him. He always had it in his mind he was going to win. Joshua had the same attitude as long as he knew it was what God wanted. In Joshua 24:15 says it all. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Their walk was based on a declaration and a decision. Their life was based on a declaration and a decision. Their walk and their life were based on a declaration and a decision. Samuel learned at an early age to hear God's voice. Samuel listened obediently to the Lord's voice. Samuel was a leader and a prophet. Samuel anointed David under the direction of the Lord. Samuel projected God's message. Again, Samuel projected God's message. David was a warrior for the Lord. David was not perfect, and David knew it. He didn't have to have anybody tell him he wasn't perfect. He knew it. David respected the Lord and would not touch anyone who was anointed by God. Saul tried to kill David on more than one occasion. Now remember, Saul was appointed by God. He was anointed by God. He tried to kill David on more than one occasion. David had the opportunity to retaliate more than on one occasion. David had the opportunity to end the madness from Saul on several occasions. David understood the hand of the Lord being placed on someone and would not lay a finger on God's anointed. He would not lay a finger on who God had anointed. I don't know about you, but if I had somebody throwing spears at me and shooting at me and trying to kill me, I would not be long for retaliation. Because, the laws of self-preservation would kick in quick. It didn't matter to David, though, if Saul tried to kill him for no reason many times. David was not going to disrespect God and take matters into his own hands. David knew the consequences of being a vigilante. David was not trying to play out that old Charles Bronson movie, Vigilante. He knew better. He knew that if he had retaliated, that God would have struck him. God knew the importance and the blessings for walking with God and doing what the Lord desires. That's why David developed that little dance move, 6 steps in worship. David knew himself, and he knew how quickly he could lose focus on God. And quite honestly, that's why I do some of the things that I do. I've got password reminders, I've got email reminders just to keep that 6 steps in a worship so that I am doing the right thing. Am I perfect? Absolutely not. Ask my wife. You might think that David was some sort of a schizophrenic or he had ADHD or something like that. No. David was a warrior. David put enemies to the sword. Today's battles are fought typically from miles away because of our modern day weapons. Just a simple sniper's rifle, you can hit a target at 2 miles away. Not to discount what happens today, because war is war. Back during David's time, battles were up close and personal. They were fought hand to hand most times, up close and personal. You could smell the breath of the person that you were fighting. The mental, emotional, and spiritual distractions that comes with that is unimaginable. We can't even spank our kids nowadays without needing to go to counseling. David's 6 steps in the worship dance brought his focus back around to love our God. Brought his focus back around to the love of God. David projected an intense desire to follow the Lord and worship him at all cost. Now, there's several others in the Old Testament that I could talk about. They were leaders. They were consistent in their walk. They didn't have the Bible we have today to learn from. They all had one thing in common. They all had a belief and faith in God and did not have the Holy Spirit in them to guide them. See, my favorite leader in the New Testament, who do you think it is? Sean, who do you think it is?
Mark.
No. Sean said Mark. I don't know if you heard it. I'm sure most of you, for your own personal favorite, would say Jesus. He was, in fact, the prototype. Jesus was. Now, my favorite leader of the New Testament was Paul. We will talk about Jesus in a few minutes. Jesus is the one we're supposed to be like, because again, he was the prototype. Paul is my favorite leader because he was the one that was transformed the most. Paul, first known as Saul, was part of the Sanhedrin. I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but you get the gist of it. You can read about him in the book of Acts. Saul was supporting and giving approval for the stoning and the death of Stephen. Again, not sure how you pronounce that, but again, it's all in the book of Acts. He sought approval and letters from the high priest to be able to put those of the way, the Christian way, in prison. Basically, Saul hated Christians and was doing what he could to stop them. Now, Jesus met Saul in a flash of light on the road to Damascus. And the cool thing was, immediately referred to him as Lord. Saul was Jesus' chosen instrument to carry the name of Jesus before the Gentiles and their kings and before the people of Israel. After a bit, Saul became known as Paul. He became very well known. Even the demons knew who Paul was. Paul had a transition or conversion from hating Christians and putting them in jail to being the carrier of the message of Jesus. To do a complete 180 and to know eventually that you will die for the cause that you once hated is a true conversion. And Paul is, for the most part, responsible for the modern day church. See, that took a sincere encounter from Jesus, or a sincere encounter with Jesus. Paul completely projected true conversion to Christianity and sincerity in that conversion. I don't know why I'm having a hard time with that word. Paul completely projected true conversion to Christianity and sincerity in that conversion. Paul projected confidence and compassion for the message he was carrying. You know, there's things that you just can't act. You have to be confident. You have to be sincere in what you're saying. And Paul projected confidence knowing that he would suffer and die for the message. So let's talk a little bit about Jesus. He was prophesied about back in the book of Isaiah, generations before his arrival. I think it was 400 and some years from David to Jesus, 450 if I remember right. I've got that in one of my other messages. I didn't pull it up, and I just thought to say that right now. Jesus came about in an abnormal way. He came through a virgin birth. You know, that virgin birth thing was kind of God's way of saying, I got this. I don't need your help. If I do it, you'll take credit for it. No, if you do it, you will take credit for it. So God was just kind of saying, stand back and watch. And Jesus was all about submission to the will of the Father. Jesus was all about being trained in what the Father wanted from him. Jesus was all about only doing those things he saw the Father do. Jesus was all about seeing the hearts of people. Jesus was all about meeting people where they are. Jesus was all about taking people by the hand and lifting them up out of where they are. Jesus was all about giving hope to those who didn't have any. Jesus was all about giving love to those who need it. Jesus was all about telling the truth that to those that needed to hear it. And the beautiful thing was, Jesus was all about giving credit to the Father that sent him, giving credit to his Father who sent him. By trade, he was a carpenter. He knew how to build things physically. And Jesus was all about building people up. He was not interested in tearing people down. He wanted to build people up to their potential. And he was all about building people to righteousness and leading them to his Father. And, you know, Jesus was all about giving people a knuckle sandwich when they needed it. And most times they ate it with no issue. There's an art with handing somebody their head and they say, thank you very much. And that's how Jesus was. He could correct people and they would receive it. And, you know, we've heard Pastor Jim say this a million times. You know, Jesus was the prototype. Jesus projected all 9 of the fruits of the Spirit. Can you name them? I had to look them up because I can't remember them all. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. So now let's turn this into a personal perspective. Just before the COVID-19 pandemic hit, I was in the office in D.C., we had one of our team members send out a message to us all. She was leaving the team and headed to another group in the building. And she was a really kind person, you know, I love being around her. She was taking a few minutes to express her gratitude for everyone on the team. And there's about 15 people on the team, and she couldn't write a letter. She had to do the more personal thing and create a PowerPoint. She did a slideshow and had a slide for each person on the team. When she got to me, she referred to me as a pastor undercover. And I took that as a compliment because, you know, the reason I did is because I don't shout from the mountaintops that I'm a pastor in the workplace. I don't shout that anywhere. I mean, I am who I am and I do what I do. I'm all about giving to Caesar what is Caesar's, meaning my boss pays me to do a good job and work hard, and that's what I do. And, you know, too much effort or conversation on the behalf of a pastor could be viewed as a conflict of interest. I'm all about expressing my faith in the workplace where opportunity strikes. I talk regularly to people all across the country daily. I'm often in conversations about the Lord and what He has done for me, in me, and through me. I've never told anyone in the workplace that I am a pastor. This person and I have several similar acquaintances, so maybe she heard it through the grapevine. I don't know. But for her to publicly acknowledge me as a pastor in a positive manner, and me never telling her that I'm a pastor, says something. You know, I guess that I'm projecting something that I'm supposed to be projecting. I guess those kind words spoken honestly and habitually to everyone makes a difference. I guess those supportive words in an email to everyone have made a difference. I guess that smile on my face to everyone has made a difference. And I've always had doubts in my mind. You know, the enemy's always beating me up. I've always had doubts in my mind for years. You know, that what little am I doing in the workplace to affect anyone? I've had thoughts that maybe I should be shouting it from the mountaintops. You know, the doubt that I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. I've had thoughts that I should be doing so much more and that I'm no good for the gospel in the workplace. When in fact, just being me and being who I'm supposed to be with confidence is all you need to be. God only needs your availability and He will take care of your capability. We're only required to plant the seed and God is responsible for the rest. So in these times of desperation and panic and fear and uncertainty, just ask yourself, what am I projecting? What are people seeing? Are they seeing confidence in Jesus? Are they seeing confidence in the God that created me? Are they seeing what they're supposed to see? Are they hearing what they're supposed to hear? So again, just ask yourself, what are you projecting? Amen. Hope you all have a blessed afternoon, because it's probably right about now, it's 11:30, you're getting off early. Don't forget, reach out to people, tell them you love them, tell them you miss them, call somebody. You know, you can't go visit them, but at least a friendly voice once in a while. Thank the team that's putting these messages together, because it isn't without sacrifice. Y'all be safe, be blessed, and keep doing what you're doing. And we will see you all very soon. Thank you.